Welcome to this edition of the Rayner Report. My name is Tom Rayner. I'm loving doing this. Absolutely, every time we do these videos, we have them for you about every other week, and we've been sharing them different topics related to pastors, related to church leadership. But one of my favorite areas, I like to fancy myself a futurist, though I'm probably overstating my own insight, but I love to look forward and see where the church is headed. Now, I know from a biblical theological view where the church is headed. I know that I've seen the entire story and we win, so I get that. But in the meantime, there are certain things that will unfold and develop, and I began to look at these different disparate parts and able to just say, these are some trends that I see. As a matter of fact, I'll be offering something in the future, I don't have it right now, called X.Church, and it's basically X is a variable. What is the future of the church? What are the variables that are out there? So, stay tuned. It'll be a while before I get to that. But when I look at the future of the church, something I did several years ago was I said one of the future trends that I see are smaller worship centers. Now, how did I know that? Well, I'm not the brightest bulb in the chandelier. So the reason I knew this is I saw that it was some things that were happening, both there were some churches that were beginning to build smaller, very few of them, but also some things were taking place that would lend itself to this development unfolding. So what are some of those things that have happened where we are now for certain seeing churches build smaller worship centers? What are some of the things that began to unfold? The first of these is one of the areas that is probably one of the most painful for pastors. Well, certainly one of my pet peeves in church life is, number one, decreasing frequency of attendance among church members. Now think about it this way. A church of 100 has 100% of the people attend every worship weekend. You know what their attendance is? 100. You're very smart. But let's take that same church of 100 and say that people only attend on the average every other weekend. Now the church of 100 has an average attendance of 50. Attendance has been cut in half. They've lost no members, but because the frequency of attendance has declined, the church attendance average has dramatically declined. This is the reality that we're seeing in our culture today. It used to be that a church member who attended on a frequent basis was someone who attended 2, maybe 3 times a week. Now we use those same numbers 2 to 3 times and we say a month. That's a frequent church attender. It has been a dramatic change where what we perceive to be an active church member has changed dramatically and quite frankly for the worse. If you have decreasing frequency of attendance, you have decreasing overall attendance. If you have decreasing overall attendance, you have less need for a larger worship space. Thus, this is one of the major contributing factors to smaller worship centers. Another one is just the growth of the nones. You've probably heard that, N-O-N-E-S. And it refers to a Pew Research project that was done. The data's a bit old. It was done between 2007 and 2012. And basically, here's what it said. The number of people in America who say they have no religious affiliation has gone from 15% of the population to 20%. Now, I'm not going to try to get into too much of a statistical study right now, but I want to tell you, when something goes from 15% of a population to 20% of a population, that's 5 percentage points. 5 percentage points over 15 percentage point means it's a 33% increase, not a 5% increase. Don't worry about the data. Let me just put it this way. It's big. It's really big. When there's been that kind of shift in people with no religious affiliation in just a 5-year period, it is significant. This too, I call it the death of cultural Christianity, but the advent of the nones is another way of explaining it. This is a huge shift. And it has caused us to look at worship centers and say, do we really need them as large as we did? Because the nones are no longer culturally expected to attend church, and there are more of them as well. Another major trend, I think this one's been kind of positive, the trend toward the multi-site or the multi-venue church. It wasn't that long ago that, in fact, it was the previous Sunday from the point of this recording that I was in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I attended the Summit Church where J.D. Greer is the pastor. My son is a member of that church, and so I attended the Saturday 4 o'clock worship service at the North Campus North Raleigh campus. Now just think about that. Here is a church that had a Saturday service, it had multiple Saturday services, had 4 o'clock, and it had multiple sites as well. Now, I know that Summit Church is an exception in many ways to all kind of rules, but the point is the multi-venue, which means that you're having different worship services within the same facility, or the multi-site, which means you're in a different place, a different geographical location. That means if we have more of those, we need less of the big box worship center. That means that we are moving towards smaller and smaller worship centers. I love the multi-site. I love the multi-venue strategy. I think it's a great use of resources, and I think it's one of the most effective ways to see churches grow as well. Another reason is the millennials' aversion to large worship centers. That's a general statement. It's not all of them, but it's some of them. That generation, born between 1980 and 2000, the largest generation in America's history, 78 million of them, they generally stay away from the huge, large worship gathering. Their preference are smaller worship gatherings, and so they're going to multi-site churches or smaller churches. And if that's the direction that they're headed, that also means that there is less need for the big worship center. So the millennials are contributing significantly to the trend of smaller worship centers. Another reason is negative. Number 5, governmental agencies are increasingly becoming unfriendly to churches expanding their facilities. Now, why is this? There's one reason that is understandable. One is when a church facility just grows in the same location, it can cause traffic and safety problems, say, within that neighborhood or wherever it may be. And so the governmental agency may say, no, we got too many people gathering at one time. We don't need you to expand. But the reality of it is many governmental agencies don't want you to do so because they're hungry for tax dollars. They don't want that footprint to expand so that there's a not-for-profit located at a place where they're not paying property or other taxes. And so many governmental agencies are becoming unfriendly to proposals to expand. Some of them are just anti-Christian. That may not be many of them, but that is the reality. I deal in cases of expert witnesses almost every single year, and one of the most common reasons of lawsuits among churches and municipalities is where the municipality or the zoning agency, the governmental agency, says, we're not going to allow you to expand, and the church then has to take it to a governmental authority through usually the legal process in order to be able to expand. This is a real reason, and it may increase with greater frequencies. Another thing is the emphasis from the big worship event to what I think is healthy in this sense, more of an emphasis on groups, community groups, life groups, home groups. The church is getting smaller, and so more and more emphasis is upon these groups rather than the big worship gathering. In the 80s, particularly the late 70s and the early 80s, there was a strong emphasis upon getting as many people in one place at one time as possible. And the more you could get at one place at one time as possible, the healthier you were. That's no longer the case. Healthiness is often measured in group attendance even more than worship attendance. Finally, of all these 7 reasons, number 7 is the desire to spend more on ministry and less on facilities. If you built the big box worship center, you have to fill it. You have to have a high occupancy rate in order to pay for it. That's just the crass reality. More and more churches are saying we're spending too much on facilities instead on ministry. And, we have 400 in attendance here. We can build a 250 worship center, and we can have a couple of services. And if we grow, we can have 3 services or multi-day services or whatever the case may be. More and more churches are realizing the best stewardship probably is not the large worship center. The best stewardship is a smaller worship center many times. And speaking of stewardship of facilities, if you really want to know about building a facility, if you really want to know about remodeling a facility, one of the best places to go is Costco, our sponsor. They're a design build firm, and where they do a lot of church remodeling, they do a lot of church building, and we have been with them and they have been with us for a long time. You can reach them at churchdesign.com. Tim Songster is their CEO. They're doing a great job in church facilities. I've said on more than one occasion, 2 of my sons are using them in their churches, so we must believe in them. Go to Costco, and their website is churchdesign.com. Contact their CEO, Tim Songster, and he'll be more than happy to talk to you about possibilities of church facilities. I think that this is an exciting trend, more positive than negative. I think it will help churches grow healthier, and that's what we're doing at the Rayner Report. We're working together to grow healthier churches. Thank you for being a part of it.